I need to listen from you. Any contribution? Any contribution, dear class? Did you understand what I talked about the Josephine case? Hello? Hello? Any contribution, please? Are you still there? Hello? Now let's talk about the absolute and relative poverty in that particular case. How do you explain Josephine's feelings when you are talking about the absolute and relative poverty? I think this is much more clear. How do you discuss the absolute and relative poverty in the case study that I just presented?
Thank you.
Go on, please.
To my understanding, I think that we can for the outside poverty, you can compare the housing of that what origin people to the housing of the other people who have not origin from that, and we can see that those have poor housing compared to other community members. For the relative poverty, there are some other people who are not the origin from Patwa, but who have the poor housing like that, those who originate from that group. So that's my idea. Thank you.
And how would you relate it with Josephine feelings? How would you relate it to this particular Josephine and how she feels about herself and about the Batwa community, for instance?
For me, if Josephine, for my understanding, I understand that mainly Josephine feels that when she compare her life to the life of that people from Batwa origin, she see that for example, she is rich, or she has a good life compared to that people, even if in the community there are other people who are rich than her. But when she compare herself to those people, she see that she has the good life compared to them.
And that is what you call absolute or relative poverty.
That is the absolute poverty.
Absolute poverty for Josephine or for the Batwa origin community?
Absolute poverty for the yes, for the Batwa origin.
Yes. Indeed, as the story just mentioned, Josephine also feels to some extent that she lacks some kind of needs in her daily life. But when she compares her life with the life of the Batwa origin community, she sees that there is kind of difference. For them, for that particular community, she can interpret it as the absolute poverty because they lack the kind of the basic needs according to the story that she has had. But when we talk about the relative poverty, that is the kind of the difference between her conditions and the condition of the Batwa origin community that she was referring to. So indeed, she lacks some kind of needs, but when she compares her life with the ones of the Batwa, there's kind of the relative poverty. So there is a difference in terms of the socio-economic status of Josephine and the ones of the Batwa origin community. Now, as we are trying to end our discussion for today, unfortunately, we don't have time for discussion anymore. But I just want you to keep reflecting on this and write down what you think. How can absolute poverty influence health? So, looking at the definition that we just provided, but also looking at the kind of the case study of Josephine that we were just discussing about, and the other family that also I showed you the pictures. How can the absolute poverty influence health? And in your own text, you are going to at least have four examples that we are going to analyze. Secondly, how can relative poverty influence health? What do you think? How, in which conditions, in which mechanism can relative poverty influence health? So these are two questions. How can absolute poverty influence health? But also, how can relative poverty influence health? And as we don't have much time left for our discussion, I just needed to have one person to try to tell us how can absolute poverty influence health, and the other person will also try to relate the relative poverty and the health. If I can just have two people before we conclude the lesson today. Two candidates, please, starting with the absolute poverty and its relation with the health. We can't limit ourselves to the definition of absolute poverty and the relative poverty without relating them to the health, to the concept of health, epidemiology. So how are these two concepts being related to the health, or how do they influence health? Please go on. Just two candidates, two quick candidates. Alfredi? Alfredi, are you still with us? Just tell us how can absolute poverty being related with health? Jeannette Niyomugabo?
I think
Mhm.
as what we saw on the absolute poverty, people are lacking the basic needs, let
Mm.
them have access to food, shelter, and then that affect the way they live and their health. For example, if they're not taking food that should be contributing to their maybe bodybuilding, I think it's a way they can be affected by disease so easily.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what I think about how the absolute poverty exactly affect their way of living, their health.
All right. And what about the relative poverty?
Mm. On the relative poverty, maybe I'm not getting it well, but what I think about it is though people with relative poverty, though they have somehow the life standards,
Mm-hmm.
their health may be affected in a positive way, if I can say that.
There,
Their health may be affected in a positive way.
in a
For ex-
positive way.
because they're having, that's what I'm thinking. Mm, they can have way of getting to the health centers,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I'm not
Thank,
getting.
thank you so much, Janet. Anyone who can just tell us about the relative poverty and how it is influencing the health?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For me, how to understand them. For example, the person who have the basic needs but not at all means he is rich compared to the very poor person, but although he has some basic needs, there are other needs that he doesn't have. For example, by comparing the level of income, for
Mm-hmm.
example, comparing the teachers, the farmers,
Mm-hmm.
the teachers may have some basic needs compared to the farmers, but even though he has the basic needs, there are some needs that he cannot afford, which influence the health. For example, if he has the disease and want to go to the district hospital or the the hospital which require the high amount of money, the teacher cannot afford that money to go to that hospital, and maybe the disease can progress and lead to death. But even though she's rich compared to that to the farmer, she doesn't have the all needs she want to have the good standard of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet and Doris. Indeed, when we are talking about the absolute poverty and relative poverty, they are both poverties, if I can say so, if I can put it in at large. So we are talking about poverty, but in different terms. So for the ones who are in absolute poverty, they can't even afford those very basic needs or they need for their daily life, which means that even accessing health services will be problematic. And for the ones in the relative poverty, indeed they are able to afford some kind of, or even to cover some kind of basic needs, but still they are lacking some means in terms of, for instance, taking care of their family members, in terms of maybe paying the bills, the hospital bills, as you were just mentioning, Doris. So you might be able to go to the health facility, but you may not be able to pay for the total bill for the hospitalization, for instance. It doesn't mean that you are not having the basic needs, that you are not having food, that you are not having shelter, that you are not having clothes, and so on. But you are not able to afford the kind of the services that, or even other particular needs in your life. So when you are talking about absolute and relative poverty, still it is poverty, but at different levels. And for the people who are in the absolute poverty and relative poverty, it may influence the health in different ways, depending on the means, but also depending on the needs. As I think we have just gone beyond the time that we're given to discuss, and as we conclude the lesson for today, I just want to understand whether there is any burning question that is still remaining. But to just remind you that what we have been looking at is about the epidemiology, but also the relationship between epidemiology and social epidemiology. We have been looking at the link between the health, the community health, and epidemiology. We have been looking at listing the social determinants of health, but also how they are being influencing the health at large. And we also looked at the poverty. That is where we ended now, looking at the poverty and how it is being associated with the social epidemiology and how it is also influencing the health at large. And we also tried to understand some kind of the concepts, the key concepts that are being used in the epidemiology, namely the incidence and the prevalence, but also the concept of exposure and the outcome. Any burning question before we conclude? No question? No pending question, dear class? Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your attention and participation, but also for the patience to finish the lesson. Now, as we conclude, we also have another one, and I see that it is now 12 o'clock. We have another one about gender and health. How is your day planned today?
I
Do
guess
you have class representatives?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So,
We were supposed to have group works afternoon, but it depends between you and Richard. The agreement between you and Richard. We can gender topic afternoon, or we can have it tomorrow because we don't know the schedule for tomorrow. Actually,
we don't have the schedule for tomorrow. And
but
your lunch time is,
haven't yet come.
sorry?
As you said, we still have two topics we haven't covered.
Yes. So we still need to discuss with Richard to see if we can have it just after your lunch today or tomorrow. But I prefer to have it today. It's just going to be 1 hour session. It's not going to be like the social epidemiology. So it would be good to be done by today.
Yeah, thank you.
When were you supposed to start the group work? This afternoon? What time?
According to the teaching plan, it always say like we can start at 2 p.m. Yeah.
Up to?
The whole afternoon was supposed, I guess, for the group work, but it normally changes according to the lecture.
Okay. So let me contact Richard to see what is feasible by having it today afternoon or even tomorrow, and then he will get back to you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And I hope you can easily get given feedback, right? So he can send the feedback as soon as possible and you can get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. And I hope that by the end of this session, you are now becoming the social epidemiologist, not only the medical epidemiologist, combining both medical and social aspects of the epidemiology, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.